Ladies, gentlemen, and pals of all ages, over the last year since the initial release of Palworld's early access, there have been a ton of additions to the game, with the majority of them coming in the Feybreak update that hit the game right around 2 weeks ago. This update is massive, adding not only a large amount of new content with a whole new island that completely just expands all expectations for what the size of the eventual full map will be, but also adding new stuff to pre-existing parts of the game as well. Today I'm going to go over some fun or useful tips and tricks that you can do, and as someone who stopped playing the game ages ago and came back for this update, I found it took me just a little bit to shake off the rust, and honestly to remember how many silly parts of this game have way more hidden uses than is immediately obvious. A first great example, the Katana. This is a new melee weapon added in for level 29 that you can make fairly cheaply and early on. For general combat, most players don't really like the way that it functions, the way that its attack works, but that is only its intentional design, because there are two other crazy uses for this weapon. The first one is to create a rocket launcher baseball bat. Yep, you heard that right. To be more specific, when you use the katana after initiating the attack animation itself, you can switch weapons, and this has very interesting effects, specifically seeming to change the damage of the katana strike to match the damage of the swapped weapon without consuming any of its ammo if it's a ranged weapon. So obviously the best combination for this is using a rocket launcher, making you essentially have an exploding katana. Enjoy! The other main use people have found for this weapon is when you are over your weight limit and either between grappling hook cooldowns or there is no particularly efficient grappleable spot nearby, so you just use the katana attack, which throws you forward for that momentum. That said, if you don't like dealing with weight limit in the first place, there's no reason to resort to these types of silly workarounds anymore, as one of the quieter parts of the Feybreak update were additions to the world settings that you can change before you actually enter your world on the menu. There are a bunch of useful new things in here. There is now a hardcore mode that you can elect to play if you want to mess around with that, just to like shake things up from the default gameplay of the way the game plays. There is a random pals option that can only be used on newly crafted worlds, but essentially acts as a randomizer for pal locations, which is quite a fun concept for an alternate playthrough, especially because they've got the seed option, so if you find a cool seed you can share it with other people, and then other people can have this randomly generated world that happened for you that you thought was pretty cool. But then there is also, very importantly, item weight rate modifier. Changing this setting will adjust the weight of every item in the game. You can make them heavier if you're a masochist for some reason. You can set them to like half or 1/3 of their normal weight if you still want weight to exist as a function, but be a bit less restrictive than it actively is right now. Or if you're just done with the concept of weight as a system entirely, you can set it to 0 and carry tens of thousands of rocks on your person just for the sake of it. As well, on a somewhat similar note, there are now new occasional events that will happen within the game: supply drops and meteorites. These will just happen sometimes within your vicinity and you will be alerted to them, and both of them are essentially a bonus to go and collect when they happen. There is also an option in the world setting for modifying how often this happens, so if you like it, maybe you want to have them happen like all the time, just way more frequently than they normally would. If you don't like it, you can essentially just remove it from the game entirely by setting its spawn rate to the minimum. Moving back to in-game stuff then, again, a bunch of stuff was actually added to the pre-existing sections of the game that were already there, including a lot of new unlocks in the earlier parts of the technology tree. Some highlights to make sure that you don't miss them are the new expedition system. This lets you send out a load of pals to just generate resources for you over time, essentially. It takes a crap load of space within your base and it uses a lot of pals, but it can be quite valuable. There's also the Pal Research Laboratory, which has what are essentially skill trees for each work type to make them more efficient and offer various bonuses too. But the main bonus tip here is if you create multiple research stations within your base, you can speed up the research dramatically, as only one pal can use each station at a time, but they can collaborate through multiple of the stations existing within your base. There's also sphere modules, which have been added to the game. You can only have one of these equipped at a time on your character, but you can either choose to have a more curved ball throw or a longer range ball throw, through which one of these you choose, and these modules also increase your capture chance passively, with higher level ones giving better bonuses. So these are something that you want to pick up quickly if you're just jumping back into the game now. Then the last major thing that I want to talk about in the pre-existing sections of the game are the new bounty targets. Across your map you will see purple circle tokens. Go up to these in the world to find a human enemy who has had their bounty posted. Defeat them either by killing or capturing and you'll get a smattering of rewards, including some bounty tokens, which you can now exchange in all of the towns with the bounty vendor for a number of different things, ranging from just a bundle of technology points to small permanent upgrades for some of your pals' stats if you stockpile a load of them to actually trade for, which is obviously quite the solid thing to aim for long term. But there's also another thing called bounty tokens that weren't added to the game, strangely enough, and this is the reward for defeating each alpha pal the first time, and these will actually give you a permanent statistical upgrade to your character. Each token from each boss will give you a different upgrade, but they do stack up, and these are actually quite good for you long term. So if you haven't cleaned up a bunch of the bosses around the map, now might be the right time to do that. Moving on then, there is the new island, and there are a couple of major topics here that I do want to go over, while avoiding spoiling the new stuff as much as I possibly can. The new island in itself is in the bottom left section of the map, the southwest past the volcano, and it is massive. If you approach this island on a flying pal, you will encounter an anti-air protocol that will blast you into oblivion, which is obviously quite inconvenient. So the two ways of approaching this properly are either just using water pals to swim and land mounts while you're actually on the island, or for people who never learned the technique in the base game, grapple gliding is still an incredibly potent method of movement in this game. You can do this with a glider, but it's more effective on a glider ability pal that you build for this purpose, as they have more speed and stamina, but you use a grappling gun, cancel it before it fully reels you in, so you're still flying, you've got the momentum, and start gliding while you have that momentum from the pull-in. This will just launch you into the direction that you've aimed at, and it won't trigger anti-air defenses either because it doesn't count as flying. Finally then, I want to talk about 3 specific pals and why you will likely want them from this new island, whether you realize it or not at first glance. The first is called Smokey. This pal has a ton of spawns at the front side of the island, and also its alpha field boss version in the southeastern side of the island, and its pal ability lets it search for Chromite, which is the new highest tier ore that you'll need to collect to upgrade your armor and equipment in general. You want Chromite, and this pal will also make enemies drop Chromite when you are fighting alongside it too when you kill them, so if you want Chromite, pick up a Smokey. After that, Tarantris. This pal is absolutely freaking amazing, and if you were concerned about movement on the new island with the whole anti-air thing that we talked about, this pal is your instant fix. The pal ability, once you unlock the saddle, lets you ride it and just grapple around the place, and it's really fun. It's not necessarily going to make your life more efficient, but it'll definitely make it more enjoyable as far as your future within this game. As for catching it, they tend to spawn in the sort of middle area of Feybreak Island. There is an alpha boss for this as well, but it is level 57, so a bit of a tougher thing to overcome straight away. Then last up we have Night Mary. This relatively unassuming pal has an incredibly powerful ability called Soul Collector. This very simply makes pals that you defeat drop extra pal souls when this pal is out. So if you want pal souls, and pal souls are a very solid way of increasing your power long term, then this pal simply makes it easier to farm them. As for getting it, it spawns on the southern section of Feybreak Island, so it is a bit of a later one even within the actual update's content, but it is an important pal to be aware of and to pick up, at least as far as I'm concerned. Mostly that to say though, even if you don't like the look or concept of a new pal the first time you see it, always catch at least one of them, because you may be missing out on an incredibly potent pal ability if you don't. That just about does it for today, and everyone, a chat about some tips, tricks, and just general advice of some things to engage with in the new Feybreak update for Palworld, especially for people who have been away from the game for ages. If any of you out there have been maybe playing for the entire time since release, because I know those of you exist, you'll probably know things that I don't even know. So if you have any tips for returning players like this, please feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.